views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Welcome to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We have a strong show for you today as we continue our mayoral series. Fernando Mateo, Curtis Sliwa on the Republican line will be here to discuss what they would do if they were elected mayor. Stay tuned. Today's verdict starts right now. Okay, welcome back to today's verdict. We are continuing our mayoral series, and we have a candidate for today's show who I'm a big fan of, Curtis Sliwa. Curtis, thanks for being here today. I've been looking forward to meeting you.
My pleasure. And back to my roots in the Bronx, where I started the Guardian Angels 42 years ago on Fordham Road in Webster as a night manager of Mickey D's McDonald's.
Listen, we're big South Bronx, my family. We practice law there, and we've been there for a long time. And to be honest with you, a lot of those people in the Bronx are hurting. We'll start off there if we could. It's been a tough go for them with respect to the pandemic. What are just your thoughts in terms of you're running for mayor, you're very popular, maybe just kind of rebuilding these small businesses, trying to get them back on their feet? What are your thoughts, Curtis?
Well, it all starts with public safety and law and order. Remember, if people don't feel safe riding the trains or walking in the streets or even going to relax in a park, they're basically going to stay in their apartments, lock themselves in like they did during the pandemic. And number two, how a business is going to reopen if they don't have their clients coming to purchase their products or avail themselves of their services. And certainly we're never going to get those tourists to come back. So you've got to establish safe streets, safe subways, safe parks. You begin to do that, and now all of a sudden you can incentivize people to reopen businesses that were maybe closed. Or in my program, if you go to curtissliwaformayor.com, you see the right to business, where I know there are a lot of men and women out there, they have that dream, rags to riches, capitalism, not the socialism of AOC. And they'd like to get into their own business. And we want to give them an easy pass to get past all of those licenses, permits, the fees that they have to pay so that they can live the American dream in a lot of that vacated commercial space.
There is a lot of red tape. Let's switch gears for a second. Let's talk police. I mean, that in terms of safety and security, I mean, that's your thing. I mean, that's where you've been. That's where you've come from. Everyone knows you for that more than anything else. Let's talk about the police. It's been a difficult time last 6 months to a year. What would you do as mayor with respect to police? Well, let's start right there.
Number one, you got to restore the $1 billion that Mayor de Blasio and the city council took out of the budget. And then with a dedicated property tax to those who don't pay it, like Madison Square Garden, Columbia, NYU, Rockefeller Institute, Cornell Medical. That property tax that they don't pay will now go specifically for the hiring and training of an additional 3,000 cops. That'll give us 38,000 that we desperately need. And then naturally, as the mayor, I'm going to tell them, hey, you're going to be proactive again, not reactive. Go out, do your job as you were trained to do. But if you cross over that Maginot line and violate people's civil rights, I'll be your worst nightmare. That's fair and square for the police. And don't force them, the new graduates, that they have to live within the 5 boroughs, because they're only going to make $42,500. And let's face it, where's the affordable housing for them? That's why they may drive 2 hours away to Dutchess County or Orange County for affordable housing, better public schools, and a little bit, maybe a half acre or an acre of their own.
Certainly for my clients in the South Bronx and the community that's there, it's really a double-edged sword. That they want the safety and they want to be secure, certainly in the subways, but they don't want to go back to a stop and frisk. They don't want to go back to being harassed. So how do you bridge the gap there? How do you be right there in the middle so that they're getting the security, but they're not harassed at the same time?
Well, you see the gunplay that's taking place, drive-by shootings we never had before, the gangs getting into this cycle of vendettas and revenge. You have to be able to stop and frisk when there's probable cause. The Constitution permits that. You don't do stop and frisk the way Bloomberg did at the end of his term, in which he was issuing quotas. The cops had to do 5 stop and frisks during an 8-hour tour. Pat Lynch, the head of the PBA, said, Bloomberg, you're turning the neighborhood against us. Stop this. But Bloomberg, he was just into analytics. And then remember, just weeks before he tossed in his $1 billion to run for the Democratic nomination, he did his mea culpas, mea maxima culpas. But it was all the numbers with him. It is a tool. You don't always use it, but you use it when constitutionally you can to get those guns out of the hands of the gangbangers, and more importantly, out of the hands of the emotionally disturbed, who are causing a lot of problems for themselves and everyone else.
You know, I actually did have a situation with somebody who was a little bit disturbed near my apartment, and I took off pretty quick. I haven't seen that before, at least not, near where I live. And a lot of people are afraid to come back to the city because they think that whether it's the homeless problem or just there's not as many arrests being made. What would you do to fix that? How could you make sure that those people that left bring their money back? What would you do?
Well, first off, you have all this, an army of emotionally disturbed men and women roaming the streets, living in the subways and the parks in New York City. What happened? Where's the money? $1.25 billion that the mayor and his wife got supposedly to help the emotionally disturbed over 5 years. No accountability whatsoever. The way you help the emotionally disturbed is you forcibly remove them from the streets, the subways, and the parks. You take them to mental health facilities, you get them on their medication, and you try to make them whole again. That's being compassionate, not ignoring them, as the mayor and his wife has done, at taxpayers' expense. Once you begin to do this, then all of a sudden, you'll notice people will feel more freedom and liberty to take the subways, to walk the streets, and then you can start working on the economics of the city, how to resurrect it, because de Blasio and Cuomo, as almost a tag team, have economically almost destroyed us by restricting us from doing anything that the rest of the country is well ahead of us on in their recovery.
Speaking of compassion, you and I were discussing off air a little bit about the no-kill shelters, which I thought was very interesting and important. Well, maybe you could tell the viewers a little bit about that, if you could.
Well, it's not just do as I say, but don't do as I do. I live in a studio apartment in the Upper West Side with my wife, Nancy, and we share it with 15 rescue cats. Every one of them was scheduled to be euthanized at the shelters of New York City that we pay millions of dollars to maintain. And most of those watching now and listening have no idea that when you bring a dog or a cat into a shelter, an animal shelter, within 72 hours in New York City, if they're not claimed, they're euthanized. Now, Los Angeles has no-kill shelters. Austin has no-kill shelters. And on day one, when I'm mayor, we're not killing any more dogs or cats or other animals in which we can adopt out. And there's so many people who want that. We saw that during the pandemic. Why do we continue to euthanize dogs and cats when we can find good homes for them? You know, a society that doesn't treat its animals right, doesn't treat its homeless right, its emotionally disturbed persons right. Notice that's the trifecta. We treat neither of the three well, and that's a pox on all of us, and that's going to change when I'm mayor of the city of New York.
It's a big job. There's a lot of fences to mend, should I say. There's a very strong progressive movement that is going. We can't ignore it. It's been there. It's here now. How would you interact with those on that side, the left side, in terms of bridging the gap in such a way so that we can have some type of organized government? What would you do there?
Well, first off, I don't pretend to be omnipotent and pretentious like a lot of those running for office. You know, they have all the answers. Who has the answers? We never lived through a pandemic before, accompanied by a near virtual fiscal collapse and a horrific rise in violent crime. So obviously, there are a lot of people out there that you got to get into a room, many of them that I don't agree with, which would include Democrats, Socialists of America, and liberal progressives. And all I'm going to say is based on the fact that de Blasio is strapping us with $3 billion worth of debt. Hey, that's a good idea, but how are you going to do that? How are you going to do more with less?
It looks like you have a good support of almost like a grassroots community. In other words, listen, I remember you also very well growing up in Queens Village. You know, I I know, you were on the streets, you were there. Do you feel that's your biggest strength, by the way? I mean, this is a lot of people have been on this show. Not a lot of people can say that they've done what you've done with respect to the Guardian Angels. Let's be fair. Do you feel that's your biggest strength in terms of your run for mayor?
Oh, there's no doubt street cred. Look at McGuire. He spent $11 million. He'll spend more before the Democratic primaries are over. And nobody knows who he is. He has no cred, street cred. Oh, maybe he has credibility as a banker. But that's not playing out in this election. You need to have street cred. And all the money in the world can't get you 42 years of street cred. Look, I go into neighborhoods where the only Republican that they have ever seen is Abraham Lincoln on a $5 bill. And yet they'll listen to me knowing I'm running on the Republican line. They'll lend me their ear. They may disagree, but they'll respect who I am and what I've done. And
some people would ask that. Why on the Republican line? Why not the Democratic line? Why are you identifying with a particular party at this point, or because you've never really identified with any particular party? You've always been in as I've seen you, as a very independent type of person in terms of your views. Am I wrong there?
No, I was the New York State Reform Party chairman, and then Andrew Cuomo, in his desire to eliminate third parties, eliminated the Reform Party, the Libertarian Party, the Independence Party, the Green Party, because he wanted to destroy the Working Families Party. How did that work out, Andrew? You destroyed third parties. So then I looked at the parties and I saw the Democrats were leaning socialist and the Republicans the capitalists. I'm a capitalist. I believe in the rags to riches story that especially a lot of immigrants have come to this city and country for that very reason. They have an opportunity here that they don't have anywhere else. So I identified with the Republicans. Now, I'll also be running on an independent line in the general and the animal welfare line. First time we'll ever have that line. So that if people can't vote for a Republican, my own mother and father, they weren't even Reagan Democrats or Giuliani Democrats. They were hardcore Democrats, but they would vote for somebody on a different line if it wasn't Republican. And that's why I'll provide sort of the trinity, the troika, the trifecta of options. You can vote for me as a Republican, independent line.
Unfortunately, some teenagers aren't old enough to vote, but there are a few of them, and one of them in particular is Evan Kleinman. Big fan of yours. The Kids for Curtis movement. What do you think about that? Are you happy with situations like that with a kid like Evan who's out there for you?
Oh, I'm euphoric, right? I have so much nachas.
I love it.
I mean, let's face it. What a form of congratulations that is from a youngster who was born and raised in the time that I started the Guardian Angels. I mean, most people who know the Guardian Angels are like 45 plus. The younger you are, the less knowledge you have of them. But for young men, young women to have taken the time to research, to know who I am and what I've done along with the Guardian Angels, that's the greatest feeling in the world. That means you have a legacy.
That's right.
Means there's a legend out there that can go from generation to generation because it's all about self-help. Us and we, no weapons, no special powers or privileges, blacks, whites, Hispanics, Asians, males and females, working cooperatively to bring peace, tranquility, and quality of life to our communities in the city at no cost to the taxpayer.
Well, Curtis, we're going to leave it there. Well said. We wish you a lot of luck in the election, and we'd love to see you again, to be quite honest with you.
Oh, yeah. And in the meantime, go to Curtis Sliwa for mayor.com, and you can see all of the different policies that I have. And hopefully you'll help my campaign, because I will be in the general election to battle the Democratic survivor.
Okay, well, you heard it here. We got so much more with today's verdict, so stay with us. We'll be right back. Okay, so welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesch. We are continuing our mayoral series, and today we have a candidate for mayor. Fernando Mateo is here, and I've always wanted to meet him. Fernando, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Looking forward for this interview.
All right. Well, it's been a little bit of a hotly contested race. We have a lot of good candidates who are vying for the position. And of course, you have thrown your hat into the ring. I want to first and foremost talk to you a little bit about the violence that's been going around in the city for the last 3 to 6 months. There's been a lot of talk about defunding the police. A lot of people who are coming back from the pandemic have some issues in terms of security. Let's start off there. What are your thoughts in terms of security, the police, and what would you do if you were mayor?
Well, first thing we need to do is make sure that everyone understands that the reason why crime is high is because the Democrats have made it made it that way. They did this program called bail reform that has basically released all kinds of criminals from jails, put them out on the streets. They've handcuffed the cops, not allowing them to make arrests when they should be making arrests. And furthermore, when they arrest someone that is carrying a gun or has committed a crime, he's back out on the streets in a few hours. So it's lack of leadership that we have in this city. It's lack of, it's turning their back. This city has turned their backs on law enforcement. They've turned their back on our finest, on our men and women in blue. And we need to get our city back and make sure that they're able to do their job. And we need to make sure that district attorneys can do their job and judges as well.
So what would you do in terms of giving them a little bit more power to be able to make their arrests, or maybe you have some other thoughts in terms of things to empower the police?
Well, what I would do, number one, is we need more cops out on the streets. We need them to be more visible. We need to get the chiefs and the captains and the lieutenants out on the street, leading their troops. We need leaders out on our streets. We need to make sure that every subway platform is a safe haven platform, where there are 2 cops at every hour of the day and night, 24/7. We need to make sure that people feel safe coming back out on the streets. If we don't have public safety, we don't have a city. We don't have a city that people are going to want to come back to work in. We don't have a city where business people are going to want to invest or risk their money. So everything revolves around public safety. And we all know that whenever there's a Republican mayor at City Hall, there's always public safety. Whenever there's a Democrat at City Hall, there is no public safety. And that is the problem we need to address. And we need New Yorkers to stop thinking about party lines. We need for them to start thinking about who can get the job done. And are you tired of the rhetoric? Are you tired of democratic rule that basically turns our city upside down? If you're tired of that, then you're going to vote for an urban Republican like Fernando Mateo.
Now, you're familiar with my community in the South Bronx. So you understand it really cuts both ways for my clients and the people that I work with and see all day in my neighborhood there. And although they do want a safer city and they want to be able to ride subways, whether it's at the 161st Street Yankee Stadium line or wherever they are, they also want to make sure that they're not, should I say, harassed by law enforcement, because they have been for most of their lives during times that they shouldn't have been. So what would you say with respect to that particular issue?
Well, once again, and I have to clarify, it's not your neighborhood, it's our neighborhood, because I'm from the South Bronx too.
That's right, it's our neighborhood.
So, exactly. So one of the things that I want to do is, of course, let people enjoy freedom. The way they can enjoy freedom is by having safe streets. We don't have safe streets right now. And I think that most people will agree that it's better to make sure that we get rid of the criminals in our community, get rid of them, put them where they belong, so that we can then enjoy our city better. South Bronx has come a long way, and it's really turning around quickly. And we need to make sure that people feel safe coming to the South Bronx. Otherwise, they're going to leave just as fast as they came in. But it's not only the South Bronx, it's across the city. It's everywhere. You know, our city is plagued right now with crime and criminals. We need to reform bail reform. We need to make sure we reform and make Rikers Island a rehabilitation center, not a jail, but a rehabilitation center where Kids could go in to do their time, but they're learning something when they're in, so that when they come out, they have something to look forward to. I did it back in 89, 90, and 91 when I had the MIT program at Rikers Island, teaching, training, and employing first-time nonviolent offenders a skill. I would redo that. I would revisit that. I would have more vocational training. Biggest problem that we have, and you could witness it like I witness it, is when you get hundreds of kids, 14 through 18 years old, hanging out in the streets, on motorcycles, on bicycles, threatening the community. These kids need to get a job after school. And I will be the mayor that will bring small businesses and kids together, corporations and kids together, city agencies and kids together. I want every kid to have what I had when I was 14, the opportunity to be guided through life, the opportunity to have a job after school so that they understand what responsibility is all about. That's the only way we're going to change our city. We can lock people up, and when they come out, they're going to commit more crimes than when they went in. But if we start addressing the core of the problems now, a 14-year-old today will be 21 in my second term as mayor. And he will be a young man that will have a job, a position, a career, and hopefully a family. And that's what we need to do with our young kids. Not let them hang out, but let them be productive.
You know, sometimes it looks like when there are issues with security or crime, there's also a homeless issue where there's more people sleeping on streets. Maybe they're just not comfortable in the shelters because of the issues that are there. Certainly my clients are not safe at the shelters. They've never felt safe at the shelters. What could you do as mayor for the homeless crisis that I really do think our city has?
If you convert the homeless problem into a business, you can fix it quickly. The problem is that we have kept it in the government's hands. Government does not know how to run a business. If you allow developers and business people to build good shelters, shelters that people can transition out of, and you get them to provide the security that's needed and the adequate resources that a shelter needs, like mental health clinics, like food banks, like all of these things, you can build communities where you can actually have homeless people living in dignity. They don't want to be in shelters because they're run by the city. They're run by government, by people that don't know how to do business. That is the biggest problem we have. I would solve it by turning it and making it a privately run entity, industry, and you'll see a big difference, and people will want to be in the shelters, not on the streets.
Speaking of businesses, you're familiar with the bodegas throughout the city. I'm there all the time, and I know they were hurting through the pandemic, and certainly being able to get some business in there. Small businesses are hurting in New York City right now, more than they probably have ever been in the last 30 to 40 years. What could you do for them, or what should you do for them if you were mayor?
Well, I'm a small businessman, so I don't have to ask them what they need. I know what they need because I'm going through it every day. I represent bodega owners. The biggest problem bodega owners have are criminals, are looters, are disorderly people that go in there and threaten their life and rob them, assault them, spit at them, and do whatever they want to do. Why? Because these criminals, if they call the cops simply say, there's really nothing that I can do. Because if we arrest him, he'll be back out on the streets in another few hours. So it's a systematic problem that bodega owners are facing. It wasn't the pandemic. They could have done very well during the pandemic because everyone needed food. We were an essential service and we provided that essential service. We weren't treated as essential workers, but we did provide what the communities needed. And what did they need? They needed a place to go and buy food so that they can feed their families. And bodegas, that's what they did. But the New York City Mayor de Blasio, who is not a leader, who is basically oblivious to everything that's going on in the city, allowed for the looters and handcuffed the cops and the district attorneys and the judges. No one did their job. So the small business people paid the consequences. I would change that. I would make sure that community policing becomes real, not a myth, not a program, not a policy, but a position. We want every police officer that's going to walk the beat to know their local bodega owner, know their local taxi cab base, know their local hair salon, barbershop. That's what we need in order to build a bridge between law enforcement and community.
Well, let me ask you a question. What would you do about, there's a progressive movement in the city. You can't really deny what's been happening. You know, there are leaders that have been elected who have a little bit more of a leftist type of bent than what you're looking at. How do you work with them? I mean, because you're really at two different ideologies in some respects.
Well, listen, I'm an urban Republican. They can't tell me about what's going on the streets because I've been on the streets my entire life. They can do this progressive line on people that are ignorant, people that are stupid, people that just don't understand the difference between right and wrong. So they play with those people. You know what? I would create awareness. I would let people know. I would call them out and let their communities know what they're doing wrong and how they're hurting their communities. Remember, the mayor has a huge bully pulpit, and I will use it. And I will make sure that every legislator in this city is held accountable. I will call them out. I will be out there. I will get the job done, unlike any other candidate can, because I am an urban Republican.
My last question to you, Fernando, because we really don't have too much time. You're elected mayor, you're in there, first couple of weeks, first month. What's the first thing you do? Where do you want to start?
Public safety. Making sure that we take our city back, cleaning up our streets, because a dirty city is a dangerous city. A city filled with graffiti is a dangerous city. We need to clean up and make sure that people know that we have law enforcement back, that they will be respected, that our police officers will have the dignity that they need to do their job. And we will make sure that our district attorneys are going to prosecute, and that the judges are going to bring down sentences. We're going to stop this bail reform nonsense. We're not going to shut down Rikers Island. Once we get public safety under control, we move on to the next thing, which is our economy, small businesses, small business development, and so on and so on and so forth. That's what I want to do as mayor when I'm sworn in.
All right, Fernando, we're going to leave it there. Good luck to you. The election is not too far away, and hopefully, win or lose, you'll come back and say hello to our viewers.
Well, listen, if you're a Republican, just come out June 22nd and vote. Vote for Fernando Mateo. I will be your next mayor. And believe me, Democrats are tired of Democrats. They will vote for me.
All right, we'll leave it there.
Thank
Stay with
you.
us. We got so much more. Today's Verdict coming right back, right after this. Well, that's all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank both of our guests for joining us and you, the viewers, for watching. If you have a topic or an issue you'd like to see on a future edition of Today's Verdict, email me at davidlesch@bronxnet.org. Until then, know the issues, know the law, reach a verdict. See you in 2 weeks.